No GPS, no group chat, no way to pause live TV, no way to know who was calling before you picked up the phone, and no way to undo a single mistake once it happened. That was just Tuesday in 1985. The 1980s weren't just an earlier decade with worse haircuts and questionable shoulder pads. It was a genuinely different way of moving through the world, one built entirely without the safety nets, shortcuts, and instant answers that an entire generation now takes for granted every single day. There was no cloud backup for your memories, no cached version of anything, and no second chance if a moment slipped by unrecorded. If you grew up in it, you survived things that would send a modern teenager into a full spiral, and you probably don't even realize how strange it sounds until you say it out loud to someone under 25. Here are 25 things from the 80s that Gen Z would absolutely not be able to handle. 25. 4 channels, and they all went off the air. Before cable spread into most living rooms, the average household had access to maybe 4 broadcast channels, and that was the entire menu, no matter how bored you got. No on-demand, no recommendation algorithm, no scrolling through 100 thumbnails looking for something decent. If nothing worthwhile was airing at that exact moment, your options were a book, a board game, or staring at the ceiling until something better came along. And those 4 channels didn't even run all night. Sometime around midnight, the station played the national anthem over a waving flag, then cut to a hissing, buzzing test pattern until the sun came up. If you missed a show, that was genuinely it. No streaming rerun, no catching it later on your own schedule. Later usually meant never, unless the network happened to rerun it months down the line. 24. Getting lost meant actually being lost. No GPS, no map app, no phone to call for directions when everything started looking unfamiliar. If you got turned around while driving, your only real options were pulling over to unfold a paper map that hopefully somebody remembered to bring, or flagging down a stranger at a gas station and hoping they actually knew the area. Miss your exit, and you might be adding 30 miles to the trip before you found a place to safely turn around. Walking through an unfamiliar city was worse. You memorized landmarks, paid close attention to street names, and built something like an internal compass purely out of necessity because there was nothing else to fall back on. Getting lost wasn't a minor inconvenience solved in 10 seconds by a blinking blue dot. It was genuinely disorienting, and meeting a friend somewhere meant showing up at the agreed time and hoping they showed up too, with zero way to check in if one of you was running late or had gotten turned around. 23. One phone bolted to the kitchen wall. Most households had exactly one telephone, tethered to the wall with a coiled cord that stretched maybe 6 feet if you were lucky, and stretched practically to its breaking point if you were desperate for a shred of privacy. Calling your crush meant dialing a memorized number while your entire family sat within easy earshot, listening to every word whether you liked it or not, and occasionally offering unsolicited commentary from the next room. There was no muting your voice, no texting instead, no editing your words before they came out of your mouth in real time. If the line was busy, you got a busy signal and tried again later, with absolutely no way of knowing when the other person would finally hang up or who they were even talking to in the meantime. 22. Research meant physically going to a library. A homework assignment meant walking into an actual library, digging through a card catalog, and hand-copying notes from a book that couldn't be searched, only browsed. If someone else had already checked out the book you needed, you were out of luck until it came back, or until you found another library entirely. Families who could afford it bought an entire encyclopedia set, 20-plus heavy volumes that cost the equivalent of thousands of dollars today, and kept it on a special shelf like a small library of its own. The information inside was frozen the moment it was printed, sometimes years out of date, and that was just accepted as normal. 21. Smoking indoors was everywhere. All the time, restaurants had a smoking section, separated from the rest of the room by nothing more than a half wall, or a row of plants which did essentially nothing. Movie theaters, bowling alleys, shopping malls, grocery stores, all of it came with a permanent haze and the smell of cigarettes baked into the carpet. Nobody blinked. Asking someone to put out a cigarette indoors was the socially awkward move, not the other way around. 20. Every ringing phone was a total mystery. With no caller ID, picking up the phone meant answering a genuine unknown. It could be your best friend, your grandmother, or the school calling about something you really didn't want your parents to hear. Every ring was a small gamble, which made answering the phone an actual decision instead of a reflex. That same anonymity made prank calls thrive. Kids could dial random numbers and ask total strangers if their refrigerator was running with zero risk of getting caught. And if you simply weren't home when someone called, they just heard it ring out. No voicemail, no missed call notification, no proof you'd ever ignored anyone. 19. Photos took a week to even exist. You shot a roll of film with 24 or 36 exposures, dropped it off at a pharmacy or photo counter, and then waited, sometimes a full week, to see whether any of the pictures actually turned out. There was no instant preview, no deleting a bad shot and trying again. If someone blinked or a thumb covered the lens, you didn't find out until you opened the envelope days later. That scarcity made people more selective about what they photographed in the first place, and it made the eventual pickup genuinely exciting, since you had no idea what you were actually going to see. 18. Bike helmets basically didn't exist. Kids rode bikes, skateboards, and BMX ramps with nothing on their heads, and road rash was treated like a badge of honor rather than a warning sign. Riding until the streetlights came on with zero adult supervision and zero protective gear was just an ordinary Tuesday. Nobody's saying it was a good idea in hindsight, but it was absolutely the norm. 17. TV Guide was the only algorithm you had before any streaming service could suggest what to watch next. There was a small printed magazine that listed every show on every channel for the entire week, and that was your only way of planning what to watch. There was no pause button either. If the phone rang during the season finale, somebody had to make a genuine choice about their priorities on the spot. Because most households had a single television, control of the remote was basically a position of power, and what the family watched together became a shared, unskippable cultural event. 16. Making a mixtape was a serious skill. Long before playlists existed, the way you built a personal soundtrack was sitting by the radio with a blank cassette, finger hovering over record, waiting for your song to start. The DJ inevitably talked over the intro or cut in with an ad right at the worst moment, and you often ended up with the tail end of the previous song stuck onto the front of yours. Making a mixtape for someone you liked was one of the most romantic gestures available. You picked the songs carefully, ordered them with intention, and decorated the cassette case by hand. The effort itself was the message, and receiving one actually meant something. 15. Arcades were the only way to play the good games. Home consoles existed, but the sharpest graphics and the newest games lived exclusively in arcades, and getting to play them meant pockets full of quarters and a wait behind whoever had been hogging the same machine for the last 45 minutes. There was no save file, no continuing from where you left off, and no adjustable difficulty. Every life you lost was actually gone. The best players in a local arcade were minor celebrities who could draw a crowd just by playing, and the arcade itself doubled as a hangout spot after school. And on weekends, money or no money. 14. Snow days were discovered at dawn, not the night before. Finding out school was canceled meant getting up early and watching a crawl at the bottom of the local news, scrolling through district names in alphabetical order while you held your breath waiting for yours to show up. Some neighborhoods relied on phone trees. One parent called two others, who each called two more, spreading the news like a slow, entirely analog chain letter that broke completely if even one link forgot to make their calls. 13. You had 20 phone numbers memorized. No exception, with no contact list to fall back on. People simply carried phone numbers around in their heads. Parents, grandparents, best friends, all of it. Losing your handwritten address book was a legitimate crisis. Kids learned their own home number as one of the very first facts of childhood, right alongside their address, because if you ever got lost, you needed to be able to recite it to a stranger without hesitation. 12. Getting cash meant banker's hours. No exceptions. ATMs were rare and not fully trusted well into the decade, so getting money meant physically walking into a bank during business hours, standing in line, and talking to an actual teller. Most banks closed by mid-afternoon and didn't open at all on weekends, which meant running out of cash on a Friday night was a genuine, unsolvable problem until Monday morning. Writing a check was an alternative, but not every business accepted them, and a single bounce check could follow your reputation for years. 11. Encyclopedias were the entire internet. When a question came up, you pulled the correct volume off the shelf and looked it up, and whatever it said was simply the answer, correct or not. Door-to-door encyclopedia salesmen sold entire sets as a genuine investment in a child's education, often for thousands of dollars in today's money. Once a fact was printed, it stayed exactly as printed until the next edition came out, sometimes years later, no matter how much the world had changed in the meantime. 10. Babysitters were basically unsupervised. Kids themselves. A 12 or 13-year-old regularly watched over younger children for an entire evening with zero training, zero background check, and no way to reach anyone except the house phone. Bedtimes got looser. The television stayed on later than it should have, and for a lot of kids, babysitter nights were the closest thing to real freedom they'd ever experienced. The whole system ran entirely on neighborhood trust. You hired the teenager down the street because you knew their parents, full stop. 9. Boredom was just something you lived with no internet, no streaming, and no social feed to scroll. Boredom was a regular part of being a kid, and you dealt with it by inventing something to do. Rainy afternoons meant board games, model kits, drawing, or just sitting around until something better came to mind. Nobody rushed to fix that boredom with a screen, because there wasn't one to reach for, and a lot of that unstructured time is now credited with teaching genuine creativity and independent problem solving. 8. Your parents genuinely didn't know where you were. Being home before the streetlights came on was usually the entire supervision plan. Kids left in the morning and roamed the neighborhood, the woods, the creek, or a half-built construction site all day, completely unsupervised, and parents simply didn't know exactly where until dinner. If something went wrong, you solved it yourself or found the nearest adult with a working phone. The idea of a parent tracking a kid's location all day, every day, didn't exist yet in any form. 7. Every special effect was built by hand. Long before computer-generated imagery took over movies, every explosion, creature, and stunt was created physically, on set, with practical materials. Alien costumes, miniature models filmed at high speed, forced perspective, and clever camera tricks did all the work that a computer would later do instead. It forced a kind of hands-on ingenuity from filmmakers that gave those effects a tactile, physical quality that's genuinely hard to fake digitally, even now. 6. You could disappear for a whole day and nobody panicked. This applied to adults too, not just kids. Leaving the house without telling anyone your plans and staying unreachable for hours simply wasn't alarming. If you didn't turn up for half a day, the assumption was that you were busy, not in danger. Personal space actually meant something, because your location and your thoughts genuinely belonged to nobody but you. 5. Stranger danger was the entire safety talk. The safety concerns of the decade were simple and physical. Don't get in a car with someone you don't know. Don't take candy from a stranger. Look both ways before crossing. The threats were visible and easy to explain in one sentence. Compare that to what kids navigate today. Cyberbullying, online predators, data harvesting, algorithmic manipulation, and an attack surface that runs 24 hours a day across a screen instead of a street corner. 4. Saturday morning cartoons were a genuine event. Cartoons weren't available on demand. They aired in one dedicated block once a week, and that window was sacred. Kids woke up early, poured a bowl of cereal, and planted themselves in front of the television for hours without moving. Because almost every kid in the country was watching the exact same shows at the exact same time. Monday morning at school ran on a genuinely shared set of references that today's endlessly fragmented content landscape simply can't replicate. 3. Handwriting was your only way to reach someone far away. Before texting existed, communicating with someone who wasn't in the room meant writing an actual letter, sealing it in an envelope, and waiting days or weeks for a reply. In school, the closest thing to instant messaging was a folded note passed hand to hand during class. Handwriting itself mattered enough that it was graded on report cards right alongside math and reading, and messy penmanship was treated as a genuine character flaw. 2. The Walkman felt like actual science fiction, Before the Walkman, music lived wherever the speaker was bolted down, your stereo, your car radio, and nowhere else. Suddenly, for the first time, you could carry your own soundtrack around in your pocket. It ran on batteries, played one cassette at a time, with no shuffle and no skip button, and if you wanted variety, you simply carried more tapes. Walking down the street with headphones on became one of the era's defining images, the very first step toward the personal portable media that's completely invisible and assumed today. 1. Every mistake had an immediate physical consequence. This is the one that actually separates the decades. If you did something reckless, you got hurt, and that was the whole lesson. If you failed a test, you failed it, no retake, no extra credit negotiation. Touch a hot stove, and you learn exactly what that means, immediately and permanently. That constant, unfiltered feedback loop built an intuitive sense of cause and effect that's genuinely harder to develop in a world with undo buttons, do-overs, and constant digital cushioning. It's not about romanticizing pain or waving away real safety improvements since then. It's just that an entire generation grew up learning how to navigate risk with zero safety net, and that shaped them in a way that's basically impossible to recreate now. The 80s weren't better in every way, and nobody's pretending banker's hours or unhelmeted BMX stunts were a great system. But it was a completely different relationship with risk, boredom, and being unreachable. And living through it built a kind of resilience that's genuinely hard to explain to anyone who grew up with a phone already in their pocket. If any of this brought back a memory, drop a comment and let us know which one you couldn't survive without today. And if you want more deep dives into the decades that built the modern world, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.